Welcome, friends. Here we are with our inaugural podcast of Living Quadratus, tuning in to the universal rhythm. And I'm so excited to be here with my dear friend, Bron. And I'm also nervous because you're going to watch us learn how to dance. And a little embarrassed too, but I'll tell you why that in a few minutes. But as you may know, I'm the author of the book Heart and Mind: The Four Gospel Journey of Radical Transformation. And I just want to invite Bron into this conversation. Um, Welcome. Here I am in Spain. There you are in Australia. Here we are doing Northern and Southern Hemisphere together. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It is really so exciting to think that we're here doing this together on completely different hemispheres with completely different weather conditions and everything else that happens. But there's so much that makes us the same. And that's what I love about what we're about to do is that it doesn't matter where we live. We are actually it's all about the same thing, and it's just about learning how to live harmoniously, live in harmony in our communities because of the teachings of the Christos and through your work, through the work of Quadratos. So yeah, thank you. I'm excited.
Well, and I love that sense of um, what we want to do is to offer the universal that lives in the story of the Christos in the what we call the four gospel journey. But I don't know about you, but it's like it's January of 2026, and my email box is filled. And every time I click on YouTube, I see all these videos and all these invitations to do this practice and to do that practice. And what it reminds me of is many years ago when I was a PhD student in San Francisco. It's like I was in the candy store of all the world's possibilities. Learn this method, learn that, learn this. This is going to do the best for you. This is the most incredible. This is going to resolve your trauma. This is going to help you live better. And it was like, there was so much everywhere. And for me, what Quadratus has done is to help me know that underneath all of that candy store wonderful ideas and thoughts and practices, there's a universal rhythm. And what all those practices do, in some ways, it's like the old story of if I give you a fish, you can eat for a day. But if I teach you how to fish, you can eat for a lifetime. Quadratus is my name, our name, for a universal reality that you're already living. Everybody alive today is already doing this. This is not adding a new practice. This is tuning in to the rhythm that you're already living by. And so I want to invite you to sit at a kitchen table with Bron and I, and we're going to be inviting people from all over the world as guests to come and talk about how they are living Quadratus, not because we want to teach you what to do, but we want to inspire you to fish for yourself because you know how to. So, Bron, can you just tell us a little bit of your story of learning how to fish in the waters of Quadratus?
Yeah, well, my story started with Quadratus at exactly the right time, surprisingly enough. I needed to know how to navigate a very, very challenging time in my life. And I had read the Heart and Mind Four Path Journey book and studied that with some friends, and then heard you talk to Rob Bell about the communities. And I love the idea of being part of a community. And so, made some inquiries about that and joined a community in 2021. And I could not believe how, as I was navigating this challenge, an emotional challenge, but also a life-changing moment where I was moving out of a career of 42 years into I didn't know what, and Quadratus took me through. It just journeyed with me, and so it wasn't long into this community that I was part of that I then realized that this was what I've been looking for. I think my whole life, my life previous to being a Christian, but especially from when I became a Christian, this was different to anything that I had learnt before. This was something that that I felt seen. I felt like
Mm.
I was recognized, and that my journey, as difficult as it wasn't a punishment. It was actually part of my growth. It was actually designed to, to grow me, to transform me. And I can hardly recognize myself from what I was like back in 2021 to what I'm like in January 2026. So, having journeyed maybe 2 or 3 paths in Quadratus, in the 4 path journey in the circle that I was part of, I then made contact with Quadratus to see if I could convene. And then from there, I have been continuing to convene a circle of other pilgrims who have also been on this journey of what does it mean to live this life that is connected to earth, that is connected to the Christos, that
Mm.
is connected to people, but also that connects us to ourselves. And so all of the people that are in my circle and the people that I have facilitated through the 11-week program, we're all experiencing the same thing. It's like, wow, this is what we've been looking for. This is stability. This is direction. This is map. That's my
So I
story.
just want to cut in and really invite people, if you're listening or watching at this moment, please, either in the comments, give us your questions, give us topics that you'd like to see us talk about, or even suggest guests that we may invite into this conversation. Because what Bron is bringing forward are all the various offerings that Quadratus provides, and we want to talk about those. But primarily, again, let's have this kitchen table conversation. Pull up your cup. There's no question or topic that's out of bounds. We want to really provide a place of friendship. And we want this to be a wide group, whether you are a seeker, whether you are a quote unquote traditional Christian, whether you're someone who may have left Christianity for whatever reason and are rethinking, or if you are in any of the world's great traditions. What we now know is we're all walking the very same rhythm. Let's share with each other the wisdom that we know, and let's deepen as we listen to each other. And that really is there's so much of my story that I could share, and I open by talking about how embarrassed I feel, and I do, because I'm not a classical quote unquote theologian. My background started in anthropology, and it started at the University of Notre Dame, listening to Joseph Campbell teaching in the theology department. And what Joseph Campbell was teaching, one of the core things that he taught me was that every great story of transformation, and if you know anything about Joseph Campbell, Joseph Campbell read sacred literature from around the world for years. And what he began to discover is that if you get underneath the characters of sacred literature, there's a universal rhythm that's spinning the tale. And so he discovered that every great story of transformation has a rhythm of four. And he said, there's not a great story of transformation in world literature that doesn't hold this rhythm of four. And this is 1973 for me, and I'm listening to him, and I'm thinking, just had this flash. Could this be an answer to how Christianity ended up with four texts that we call the gospel? In that moment, 1973, began a search that extended all the way to the year 2000. And the final piece of that puzzle hit me. I can't describe it any other way. And I keep asking, why me? I seem like the most unlikely person to have discovered a key to the Gospels that we have not talked about in 1,300 years. This key to the Gospels really got hidden from us beginning in about the 7th century. And once you know this key, everything that all of our scholars have described about quote unquote Jesus in the last 500 or 600 years has got to be expanded. Because this key is that the Gospels were not chosen to teach us about Jesus per se. They were chosen to teach us about what Jesus wanted us to know, not giving us a fish, but teaching us how to fish. That the Gospels are not per se the story of Jesus. The Gospels are the story of Jesus teaching us about this universal rhythm that we're all living, and how much richer and in some sense easier it will be when we know how to live the universal rhythm. There are difficulties in the rhythm. Those difficulties can't be avoided. But at least when you know that the difficulty is part of the rhythm, it doesn't feel like I'm personally being persecuted in some way or I've gone off track. But I know that this momentary difficulty is simply part of something that everyone experiences. And it's just actually an inherent required part of the cycle of transformation. And that cycle is not something that we do once and forever. It's something that we do over and over and over and over and over again. So when this, I don't even know what to call this. I suppose I could call it an epiphany that arrived for me in November of the year 2000. And for those who are watching this video, you know that I'm sitting here with the Epiphany tree lit behind me. That for this January of 2026, we're in the season of Epiphany, and Epiphany means an appearance or a manifestation. And that's all I can say is that in November of 2000, this way of seeing the gospel was a manifestation. It just arrived. I don't feel like I worked to deserve this in some way. It was a gift. And every day since that day in November of 2000 has been my obligation to share what arrived. And now, having gone around the world, I know how much this new way of understanding the text means to people. And I also know how there's so many great teachers today. And I could list their names. You probably know them all. But everyone who teaches starting with Jesus said or Jesus says, in any way that a person starts that way, they're teaching the paradigm that started with the Enlightenment. Quadratus doesn't start that way. We understand that, like the Gospel of Matthew is not Jesus's story, but it's rather the story that Jesus teaches us about how to live through the first path of change. And Mark is not the story of Jesus. Mark is the story of Jesus teaching us how to live through times of great trial, what we might call suffering. And the gospel that we call John is not Jesus teaching us about Jesus, but Jesus teaching us about how joy comes to us and what's the meaning and the responsibility of joy. And then Luke is not Jesus teaching us about Jesus, but Luke is the story of Jesus teaching us about how we mature in the joy that arrived in the third path by sharing and serving, and how we do that and how we deepen ourselves when we seek to serve. And that's the fourth path. And so all the stories that we think are about the personality and the history of Jesus, they were not told to tell us the personality and the history of Jesus. Jesus, those stories were given to us so that Jesus might lead us into our own life and lead us through how I today face change, how today I move through trial and suffering, how today I receive joy, and how today I offer what I know and the joy I have to others in service. So all that started for me back in 1973, sitting in a pretty cramped classroom at the University of Notre Dame, while this wide-eyed, passionate, erudite little man named Joseph Campbell opened up. I don't know whether he knew he was opening up an entirely new key to the gospel. And he answers the question of the 50 texts that were written, how do we know these four are the right ones? They are. They are the deepest truth, not just the deepest truth of Jesus, They're the deepest truth of the cosmos. And like Joseph Campbell, I've read sacred literature from all across the world. I've sat in ashrams. I've attended synagogue. I've gone around the world in Christian churches. And I am a devout Christian. Why? Because it's not only the Christ, the Christos, but it's the Christos teaching us how the gospel has four parts, because it's revealing the universal rhythm of the cosmos itself. It's not a patriarchal text. It's been made to seem that way. It's not a historical text. It's been made to seem that way. It's, to me, the deepest, most true text ever composed, because it's about how time is also timeless, and how each of us is a citizen of the cosmos. And in my language, each of us is following the universal rhythm of the one breath. And for me, I name that one breath as the Christ, the Christos. So I know that many here will have listened to Richard Rohr, Cynthia Bourgeot, James Finley, Mirabai Starr, John Philip Newell, Neil Douglas Klotz, all of those great teachers. But there's another level that none of them have yet brought forth. And that level is, the gospel is not a teaching about Jesus. The gospel is a teaching about the universal rhythm of the Christos. And we can say in that way, Jesus is the great avatar leading us to this universal rhythm that we're already living. I don't want you to add one thing to your life. I want you to touch and understand how to live the rhythm of the seasons that are already there in your life. Anyway, I've said a lot, and I get very excited, along with my sense of embarrassment. Is like, why am I the person that's saying this? But Bron, you want to?
Yeah, I do. I want to say that the reason that this podcast, I believe, is so important is because this is new. This is a new way of understanding the gospel for me, and for the people who I've been in my who have been in my heart and mind circles, where it's all the same. We keep on going back into the old paradigm. And what I hope that we can achieve, what I hope that we can bring forth in this podcast, is to just continue to bring to life this new paradigm, so that as we start to question or get swayed back into ancient, like into our past thinking, that we might be reminded again of how to live this new paradigm. And with all the guests that we're going to have from all over the world who are putting Quadratus and this paradigm into practice as their universal rhythm in all different ways, it will just be another window for us to keep looking in until this paradigm becomes settled, and we can, and we're, each one of us will be, I guess, will be out there just bringing harmony to the communities that we live in because of what we're learning.
Oh, I'm excited, Bron. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
And
join us,
again,
but everyone
please,
can join us.
please get your cup, sit at our table. There's a lot of chairs here. Whatever you believe, wherever you have come from, whatever your tradition is, let's talk about what we know about this universal rhythm. Let's explore this new frontier. If you've got a question, please write us. If you've got a topic you want us to talk about, please send that to us. If you have guests that you would like to see us have in this conversation, please. Again, welcome. Our plan right now is to have 2 podcasts a month. So as you sign up for our podcasts and subscribe, you'll get notices about when the next one posts. Thank you for being here. Thank you for wanting to start a new journey, a journey that has not been spoken on this planet in the Christian world since the 7th century. Welcome. Let's go.